Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Sandy Bob Show. This is April 9th, 2019, and we have a very interesting show on today. And we're going to talk about some things that a lot of people don't even address. Before we start the show, though, I want to tell remind all our listeners, not just the ones that are on now, but anybody that listens to this show, to be sure to do the new UUU. What the new UU does is it connects you to the real guides on the real side of life that will show you how to get out of cause-effect creation and get to where you really want to be, kind of like in a paradise. And we're kind of stuck in a cause-effect creation right now, but by singing new UU, and it goes something like new UU, or any way you want to sing it. Don't chant it, just sing it, and relax. You can sing it out loud, you can sing it to yourself, and if you do it 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes before you go to bed at night, then you're showing the real guide's intent. Intent is a very, very important part of finding out what's really going on, and you can even ask Rebisar Tires. He has a standing offer for anybody that does the new UU, that he will come to you in your sleep state and he will show you exactly what you want to know. He'll give you the answers to all your questions. So with that, I want to tell everybody, I want to start the show by picking up where I kind of left off last week. And last week, I was started talking about holograms and how we kind of live in a holographic universe. And my first exposure to holograms was I was on a U.S. Navy scholarship going to school at the University of Idaho, and on my one of my summer cruises, I was invited by the Navy to go on what they call a summer cruise, and I wound up being ordered to go down to San Diego, and then they took us on a field trip down to Point Loma, San Diego, just south of San Diego, Point Loma, and this was back around 1971, and Point Loma was an advanced research facility for the U.S. Navy, and they brought us in this room, and they had lasers set up, and one of the lasers they had set up, they had a digital readout on it in 1971, excuse me, and they could point this laser across the room at an object, and they could actually measure the distance. And they had this laser set up in this room where it was like 30 feet across, and they projected the digital readout up on a screen so everybody in the audience could see it. And it would read the distance to like 10,000ths of an inch, extremely accurate. And the the guy putting on the demonstration said, well, let me show you how accurate it is. And he put his hand on top of the laser machine, and the heat of his hand instantly started warming up the machinery that was holding the laser light, and the heat of his hand caused the metals to expand, and you could actually see the change in distance from the readout just based on the expansion of the metals from the heat of his hand. And you could just watch it start clicking off the tens of thousands or thousandths of an inch, that the distance changed as he warmed up his hand. Well, that was kind of impressive. And then they did another demonstration where they took one of those old razor blades, one of those single-edge stainless steel razor blades, and they put it in a vise and held it up in front of this laser light, and they put a timer on the laser light to where this was a slightly more powerful laser, and they put it on a timer, and they turned on the machine for about, I think it was like a tenth of a second. It might have been quicker than that. And you heard a loud pop, and it burned a beautiful quarter-inch hole right through the middle of this stainless steel razor blade. So even in 1971, they had technology with lasers to burn holes through stainless steel, which was kind of interesting. But then the next thing they showed us kind of blew me out of the water. I was all new to this, and it was a hologram. And what they had done is they had taken a picture of a battleship using hologram technology, and they what they do is they make the hologram plate, and then in order to show a hologram, excuse me, they have to take the same laser light and shine it through the plate or negative of the photograph, and when they do that, you have a fully three-dimensional picture of whatever the object was. In this case, it was a battleship. And what I found impressive is they displayed this in a case, and the battleship was maybe 6 or 8 inches long, and it showed up as a hologram. And the impressive thing about it was, at the time, you could stand so you could look directly down on the deck, and you could see all the guns and the turrets and all the different paraphernalia that they have on top of a ship. And then you could lean over and look underneath the hull, and when you looked underneath the hull, you could see the screws from the propellers, and up front you could see the anchors hanging, but you couldn't see anything on the deck. It was literally looking like a actual 3D object, like a model of a ship, just like you would expect a model. It was fully 3D. You could not, unless you were on the side that the object was facing, you couldn't see it. So when you were underneath the deck, you couldn't see on top, and when you're on top, you couldn't see underneath. So it was very, very interesting how hologram technology works. Now, this was in its infancy. Today, it's just like cameras. That when they had people learning how to do black and white photographs back in the 1800s, and who knows how far back it goes, but they were taking black and white pictures, like in the Civil War. There were a lot of black and white photographs that were taken, and eventually it progressed to where somebody figured out that if you could freeze frame pictures and play them back at a high rate of speed, then all of a sudden you have movie cameras and technology. And if you've ever picked up a roll of film, like my grandfather used to have a 8mm camera, and he used to get the film developed, and they had those little 3-inch reels that they used to play it on, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen those. Well, you can hold up the film and unravel the film, and you can see the individual photographs. Excuse me again. You can see the display of the images, and then when you play it through a projector, you get the sense of time and motion. And so what it is when you play a movie through that, you get the sense of time and motion, and that's like on a projector screen. And now today's technology has the same kind of technology, really, really far advanced, where they can put images on a DVD, and you can play it on your TV screen, and you get the same effect. Now, what's interesting about all this, as I will try to show, is we are living in a holographic universe. Everything around us, and even your body, is a hologram. I know that's probably new to a lot of people, but we really are holograms. And this is, once you understand that you're a hologram, all the food you eat is a hologram, all the medicine you take is a hologram, it puts a slightly different slant on your outlook and your awareness of what life is all about. One last thing I want to say about holograms is I was really surprised in the early stages of holograms. I had a friend, and his wife went over to Ohio and went out to eat at an expensive steak restaurant. And when they got to this restaurant, they walked in. They'd never been in there before, and they walked in, and there was a dance floor. And there's he went into this restaurant, and there's a dance floor in the middle of the restaurant, and all the seating is along the outside of the dance hall. And it's a pretty good-sized dance hall, like 20, 30 feet across, and there are people doing ballroom dancing on this dance floor. They're all dressed up in their big, long garbs, and and they're doing dancing to classical music, and they're just spinning and reeling and swinging around and doing all this ballroom dancing. And he said, as he walked to his table, as the maitre d' walked him over to his table, he said he had to duck a couple times to keep from getting hit by these dancers. And so when he sat down and the waitress came over and waited on him, he said, he said, I've never seen anything like this. Where did you get all these dancers and to come in? I mean, it's really hard to get all these people to come in and dance and have a gay time like this, and especially in a restaurant. I mean, you obviously can't be paying them for any of this. And the waitress says to him, well, sir, he said, those are holograms. They're not real people. And he was stunned. He said, how can that be? And the waitress said, well, next time they come over by your table, stick your hand out right into their outfit. And he did, and his hand went right through the hologram. So that was around 1990. So that was holographic technology in 1990. And now, just like in the days of black and white photographs, moving into DVDs, now there are people that have holographic technology where they can actually have full 3D color and full motion, and they don't need a projector. They don't need a screen. They can just project the images out into empty space. And we know that from the World Trade Center, the two aircraft that flew into the World Trade Center were holograms. They were not real aircraft. There may have been a cruise missile that was flown into the building, but the aircraft, the ones that were supposed to be the airliners full of passengers, were indeed holograms. They were not real. And how do we know that they were not real? Well, when the news press first released the images from the World Trade Center and these airplanes crashing into the World Trade Center, they made a big mistake. The one that they made very public hit the side of the building of the World Trade Center, went through the building, and the right, over 20 feet of the right outboard wing came out the other side undamaged. And what happened was the guys running the holographic projector didn't turn it off in time, and the airplane kept moving through the building. Well, once that became the public became aware of that, and the guys who were authoring the false images of saying that it was aircraft that hit, they had to scramble into all the newsrooms and tell the guys to edit out that last few seconds of footage so people would not see that the aircraft went through the building and came out the other side unscathed. So that's how we know they were holograms, because that is absolutely not possible with a real aircraft. So anyway, for those of you that were not on last week, I'd like to explain how a hologram photograph is done. And the basic principle of a hologram is you need a laser light, and you need a set of mirrors. And the first mirror that you have to have about 50% reflectivity. So when you shine a laser light at this first mirror, the laser light, half the laser light signal goes through the mirror, and half of the light is reflected off in a different direction. And so when you make the hologram, you take the primary laser signal that goes through the mirror, you direct that right into the lens of the camera, and then you take the one that's reflected off, that half of the laser signal, you use mirrors to get it to reflect off your object that your camera is photographing, and when the laser light hits the object, it's just like an ordinary photograph. You get the image of the laser light reflection off that object into the camera lens. So when you take the photographic plate for a lasergram, I'll call it, you have two different sources of laser light entering the camera. And then when you have that all done, then in order to see the image as a holographic projection, you simply take that photographic plate and shine your laser light back through the photographic plate, and voila, there you have a holographic projection. Now, there's some very interesting characteristics about a hologram, and that is, now I'll read it. Now, a lot of this information I'm sharing with you, it was brought to my attention by David Icke, so I got to give David Icke full credit for getting me started on this subject, and I may quote him directly here in a few places, and it's from his book called The Perception Deception, and he really lays it out. There's a bunch of things, and I have one guest on, Claudia, that I'm going to mention some things where I think he's off track about reptilians and stuff. We'll get to that. But for the most part, he brings up some really interesting scientific fact. Anyway, here's one of the amazing characteristics of holograms, is that every part of a hologram is a smaller version of the whole. Put another way, if you cut a holographic waveform print into 4 pieces and point a laser at each one, you will not see 4 quarter segments of the holographic image. You will see 4 quarter-sized versions of the whole hologram. So what that means is any part of a hologram contains all the information of the original hologram, although it may be watered down if the part you're replaying back is a lesser size than the original. So if you took an ordinary 35 millimeter or a digital picture of, let's say you took a picture of a person facing you just standing there, and you had a photograph of that and you cut it into 4 segments, you'd have one segment with his left leg, another segment with his right leg, another segment with his right arm and left arm, and half his head or whatever. So that's the way a regular photograph works. But in a hologram, each segment of a hologram contains all the information of the original hologram. Now, you've heard the saying, as above, so below. Well, actually, everything that we see in this universe is a reflection of the original. May not contain all the information, but it is a reflection of the original. So that's important to understand. This is the beginning of understanding of how this holographic universe works.